Ethan Hawthorne stood in the middle of the bustling downtown square, the late afternoon sun warming his shoulders, but his chest felt oddly cold. He pulled the baseball cap lower over his brow and shifted the weight of his duffel bag on his shoulder. People passed him in every direction, businessmen in tailored suits, college students with earbuds jammed in, mothers pushing strollers. But no one spared him a second glance. That was the point. It was the first time in his life he could disappear. A month ago, Ethan's life had been the complete opposite of this. He was the heir to Hawthorne Enterprises, a family conglomerate worth billions, with a name that carried weight in every corner of the country. He lived in penthouses, drove cars no one could pronounce, and spent his nights at galas and charity auctions. Everyone knew his name. Everyone wanted something from him. And then came the bet. "Bet you can't last a month living like the rest of us," his cousin Marcus had sneered at the family dinner table. "No money, no cars, no credit cards, just you, a few $100 and your charm. Bet you'll be crawling back in a week." Ethan's pride had flared hot, even though the idea had seemed ridiculous at first. But Marcus had smirked at him like he was soft, like Ethan couldn't survive without privilege. And that was all it had taken. Ethan had agreed, shaking Marcus's hand across the dining table. The rules were simple. No family money, no connections, no safety net. Ethan had to live like an ordinary person for 30 days, supporting himself, finding work, surviving without leaning on his name. If he could do it, Marcus would donate $1 million to a children's charity Ethan supported. If he failed, he'd have to fund Marcus's next business venture, something Ethan despised. And so here he was, in the middle of a city where no one recognized him, wearing secondhand jeans and a faded t-shirt, his phone stripped of all contacts except for emergency numbers. He'd found a small, rundown apartment building on the edge of town with cheap rent and a room available immediately. He handed over the cash deposit from his dwindling envelope of bills and received a rusty set of keys in return. The apartment was little more than a shoebox, cracked linoleum floors, peeling wallpaper, and a bed that squeaked with the slightest movement. But it was his. He dropped his bag, sat on the thin mattress, and let out a long breath. The first day passed in a blur of trying to find work. He applied everywhere: grocery stores, diners, gas stations, construction sites. Most places looked at his blank resume and shook their heads. It was humbling, and he wasn't sure how much longer he could stretch the meager money he had. By the third day, he found a job bussing tables at a small family-owned diner called Miller's. The pay was minimum wage plus tips, and the hours were long, but it was a start. He showed up every morning, sleeves rolled up, ready to prove himself. That's where he first noticed her. She came in one rainy afternoon, shaking water from her hair as she slid into a booth. She was wearing scrubs and looked tired, like she'd been on her feet for hours. But there was something warm about her presence. She ordered the special and thanked him with a soft smile that lingered in his mind long after she left. He saw her again a few days later, and then again. It was like clockwork. Every few evenings, she'd stop by the diner after her shift at the hospital. Ethan learned her name from the cashier, Lila Monroe, a nurse at the local clinic. She wasn't flashy. She didn't wear expensive clothes or designer handbags, but there was a lightness about her. An unshakable kindness that made him notice the way her eyes crinkled when she laughed. He found himself lingering near her table, hoping she'd talk to him. And one night, she did. "You're new here," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I've never seen you before last week." Ethan nodded, pushing his hands into the pockets of his apron. "Yeah, just moved to town. Needed a change of scenery." She tilted her head, studying him. "Big city guy?" He gave a little laugh. "Something like that." They talked for a few minutes about her work, about the diner's terrible coffee, about how hard it was to find good housing in the city. She was easy to talk to, genuine. There was no flicker of recognition in her eyes, no curiosity about his last name or what car he drove. She just talked to him like he was a person. It was intoxicating. As the days passed, Ethan started looking forward to her visits. He learned she was 25, just a year younger than him. She'd grown up in the city, gone to nursing school, and now spent most of her days caring for others. She lived alone in a tiny apartment not far from his, and she often worked late into the night. He wanted to ask her out, but part of him hesitated. This was supposed to be a bet, a challenge to live like an ordinary man for a month. He didn't want to drag her into a lie, but he also couldn't ignore the way his chest tightened whenever she smiled at him. One evening, she came into the diner looking unusually downcast. She barely touched her food and kept staring out the window at the rain. Ethan, unable to help himself, approached her table. "Everything okay?" he asked gently. She blinked up at him, clearly startled. "Oh, yeah, just long day." He slid into the booth across from her, lowering his voice so the manager wouldn't hear. "Want to talk about it?" She hesitated, but eventually sighed. "One of my patients didn't make it today. She was only 9. I keep thinking I should have done more." Ethan felt a pang in his chest. "I'm sorry, Lila. That's not your fault. You do everything you can. Sometimes it's just out of your hands." She gave him a weak smile. "Thanks. It just feels heavy sometimes, you know?" "I know," he said quietly. They sat in silence for a moment before she reached across the table and touched his hand. It was a brief touch, barely more than a brush of her fingers, but Ethan felt something shift. A few days later, he asked her to join him for a walk after her shift. To his relief, she agreed. They strolled through the park, the air warm with the promise of summer. She told him about her childhood, about how she'd always wanted to be a nurse, about how her parents worried she worked too hard. Ethan told her vague details about moving here for a fresh start and learning to appreciate the little things, careful not to reveal too much. They reached a small bench by the lake and sat down, the water reflecting the moonlight. He wanted to tell her the truth then, that he wasn't who she thought he was, but the words stuck in his throat. He didn't want to ruin whatever this was. And then she smiled at him, her eyes soft and searching, and he leaned in and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, but she didn't pull away. Her lips were warm, and the world seemed to fall away for a moment. When they finally parted, Lila looked at him with something he couldn't quite name. "I like you, Ethan," she whispered. He smiled, heart pounding. "I like you too." For the first time since the bet began, he forgot about Marcus, forgot about the $1 million prize. All he could think about was Lila and the way she made him feel like he wasn't the heir to a fortune or the subject of a bet. He was just Ethan. But the truth had a way of catching up. One evening, about 3 weeks into the bet, Ethan was walking Lila home when they passed a newsstand. He froze when he saw his own face staring back at him from the cover of a business magazine, Ethan Hawthorne, the billionaire heir to watch. He ducked his head quickly, praying Lila wouldn't notice, but her gaze followed his, her brows furrowed. "Wait, is that you?" Ethan's heart dropped. Ethan froze, every muscle in his body tensing as if the world had stopped spinning. The magazine's glossy cover stared back at him from the newsstand, the headline mocking him, "Ethan Hawthorne, the billionaire heir to watch." He instinctively turned his head away, but it was too late. Lila was already reaching out, plucking the magazine from the stand with wide, disbelieving eyes. "Ethan," she said slowly, holding the magazine up next to his face. This is you, isn't it?" His mouth went dry. He'd been so careful, so cautious not to let his real identity slip. But here it was in bold print. "I can explain," he said quickly, his voice low and urgent. Lila stepped back, her expression unreadable. "Explain what? That you're not some guy who just moved here with nothing? That you're actually a billionaire heir who's been, what? Slumming it for fun?" The words cut deep, though he knew she wasn't trying to be cruel. She was hurt, confused. "It's not like that," Ethan said, stepping closer. "Please, Lila, just let me explain." She crossed her arms, the magazine still clutched in one hand. "Then start talking." Ethan drew in a slow breath, knowing this was it, the moment he'd dreaded. "A month ago, my cousin Marcus challenged me to a bet. He said I couldn't survive without my family's money or name. He dared me to live like an ordinary person for 30 days. No credit cards, no cars, no help. If I lasted, he'd donate $1 million to charity. If I didn't," Ethan swallowed hard, "I'd have to fund his next business venture." Lila stared at him, the anger in her eyes softening slightly, though not enough to erase the sting. "So this," she gestured between them, "was part of a bet?" "No," Ethan said firmly. "No, Lila. Meeting you, everything we've shared, it wasn't part of the bet. I didn't even expect to meet anyone. But then you came into the diner and you were just you. You didn't care who I was or what I had. You treated me like a person, not a name. And his voice cracked. I liked that more than I can explain. She shook her head slowly. Ethan, do you know how this looks? Like you've been lying to me from the start. I know, he said softly, and I hate that it feels that way, but I never meant to hurt you. For a long moment, Lila just stared at him, the magazine hanging limply at her side. Finally, she said, I need time to think, and turned toward her apartment building. Ethan felt panic surge through him. Lila, please. She stopped, looking back at him with tears glimmering in her eyes. I don't know if I can trust you, Ethan. I like you, but I don't know who you really are. And then she was gone, the door to her building shutting quietly behind her. The days that followed were some of the hardest Ethan had ever endured. He kept showing up to work at the diner, hoping she'd come in like she used to, but she didn't. He texted her, just simple messages asking how she was, but got no reply. Each night, he sat in his tiny apartment staring at the peeling wallpaper and wondering if he'd blown the only real connection he'd ever had. The bet, the money, the pride, none of it mattered anymore. He just wanted Lila. On the 30th day, Ethan officially won the bet. Marcus called him, laughing and cursing at the same time, begrudgingly agreeing to make the $1 million donation. Congratulations, cousin, Marcus drawled over the phone. But I have to ask, was it worth it? A whole month living like a peasant? Didn't you miss your penthouse, your chef, your cars? Ethan didn't even hesitate. No, he said flatly. I didn't. Marcus chuckled. Well, aren't you noble? Enjoy your little adventure, Ethan. I'll send you a picture of the donation receipt. When the call ended, Ethan felt no sense of triumph. Winning the bet had cost him more than he'd ever anticipated. A week later, Ethan finally decided he couldn't just wait for Lila to come back. He had to find her. He stopped by the hospital where she worked, asking for her at the front desk. The receptionist frowned sympathetically. Sorry, she's off this week. Family emergency, I think. Family emergency. The phrase made his stomach twist with worry. He left his number with the receptionist, asking her to pass it along, but there was no guarantee she would. That night, unable to sleep, Ethan went for a walk through the city. He found himself wandering toward the park where he and Lila had shared their first kiss. The memory stung now, bittersweet and fragile. As he approached the bench by the lake, he froze. Lila was there. She was sitting alone, her shoulders slumped, staring out at the water. Ethan hesitated, unsure if she'd want to see him, but something in her posture made his chest ache. He walked slowly toward her. Lila, he said softly. She turned, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. Ethan. He sat beside her, leaving enough space that she didn't feel cornered. I've been looking for you, he said. She gave a small, humorless laugh. I figured you'd go back to your world by now. You've got everything waiting for you there. Everything but you, he said quietly. Lila looked down at her hands, twisting them in her lap. My dad's sick, she said suddenly, voice trembling. Heart problems. He's been in and out of the hospital all week. I've been trying to keep it together, but it's hard. Ethan reached for her hand instinctively, and to his relief, she didn't pull away. I'm so sorry, Lila. Do you need anything? Whatever it is, I can... She shook her head. I don't need money, Ethan. She trailed off, tears filling her eyes. I don't know what to do. He's all I have. My mom died when I was little, and it's just been the two of us ever since. Ethan's chest tightened. You're not alone, he said firmly. I'm here. Whatever you need, I'm here. Lila looked at him for a long moment, searching his face. I want to believe you, she whispered. Then believe me, he said. I know I lied by omission before, and I'm sorry. I was scared you'd see me differently if you knew the truth. But I swear to you, Lila, everything I've felt for you is real. A tear slipped down her cheek, and this time when Ethan reached up to brush it away, she let him. I've missed you, she said softly. He felt hope flicker in his chest. I've missed you too. They sat there in silence for a while, watching the moonlight dance on the water. Over the next week, Ethan made it his mission to be there for Lila and her father, James. He drove them to doctor's appointments, sat with James during long hospital stays, and cooked meals for Lila when she was too tired to stand. James, a tall man with graying hair and a warm smile, was wary of Ethan at first, but he could see how much Ethan cared for his daughter, and slowly, the walls between them began to crumble. One evening, after Lila had gone to bed, James pulled Ethan aside. "She's been through a lot, you know," James said quietly. "I don't know the details of your complicated background, but I can see she loves you. Don't hurt her." Ethan met his gaze steadily. "I won't," he promised. James nodded, seeming satisfied. Just when it seemed like things were finally settling, disaster struck. Ethan was at the hospital with Lila, keeping her company while James underwent a routine procedure. But suddenly, alarms blared and doctors rushed into the operating room. Lila's face went pale. "What's happening?" she whispered, clutching Ethan's hand. A doctor emerged a few minutes later, his expression grave. "There were complications," he said softly. "We're doing everything we can, but his heart is very weak." Lila's knees buckled, and Ethan caught her before she hit the floor. "No," she whispered. "No, this can't be happening." Ethan held her close, his own heart hammering in his chest. He wanted to fix it, to write a check or call in a favor, but this wasn't something money could fix. As the night stretched on, they sat together in the sterile waiting room, the air thick with fear. Finally, a nurse approached them. "He's stable," she said gently, "but he needs surgery, soon." Lila nodded numbly. "Whatever it takes," she said, but the nurse hesitated. "The surgery is expensive, and the insurance—" "I'll pay for it," Ethan said instantly without a second thought. Lila looked at him, her eyes wide. "Ethan, don't argue," he said firmly. "This isn't about money, Lila. This is about your dad. Let me do this for you, for him." She hesitated for a long moment, tears streaming down her face, and finally she nodded. "Okay." Ethan pulled her into his arms, silently praying that it wouldn't be too late. Ethan had never felt so helpless in his life. He stood with Lila in the hospital's quiet hallway, her hand clutched in his as the medical staff prepped her father for surgery. She was trembling, her face pale, and he could feel the sheer force of her fear as though it were his own. "It's going to be okay," he whispered, brushing a stray strand of hair from her tear-streaked face. "He's strong, Lila. He's going to get through this." She nodded weakly, her lip trembling. "I keep thinking, what if this is the last time I see him? What if I don't get to tell him how much he means to me?" Ethan pulled her closer, resting his chin gently atop her head. "He knows," he said softly. "He knows how much you love him." When the doctors finally wheeled James Monroe into the operating room, Lila sagged against Ethan, all her strength seemingly drained. He led her to the waiting room and guided her into a chair. She leaned into him, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders, holding her as though he could shield her from the pain. The hours ticked by slowly. Every time a doctor or nurse passed through the double doors, Lila's head would snap up, eyes wide with hope, only to fall again when they kept walking. Ethan stayed by her side, whispering reassurances and rubbing slow circles on her back. At last, a surgeon emerged, peeling off his gloves. Lila jumped to her feet. "How is he?" she asked, voice shaking. The surgeon gave a small, tired smile. "He made it through," he said. "The surgery was successful. He's going to need time to recover, but he's stable." Lila let out a choked sob and clung to Ethan as relief washed over her. "Thank you," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was speaking to the doctor, to Ethan, or to something greater. The next few days blurred together in a haze of hospital visits and cautious optimism. James slowly regained his strength, and each time Lila saw him smile, her heart grew lighter. Ethan was there every step of the way, fetching coffee, running errands, and even dozing off in the hard hospital chairs when he refused to leave her side. It felt like they'd stepped into their own little bubble, just the three of them. But that fragile peace was soon shattered. One afternoon, as Ethan stepped into the hospital lobby to take a phone call, he noticed two sharply dressed men speaking with the receptionist. He instantly recognized the smug expression on one of their faces, Marcus. His cousin spotted him immediately and strode across the lobby with a grin that made Ethan's stomach tighten. "Ethan, there you are. I was beginning to think you'd disappeared for good." Ethan's jaw clenched. "What are you doing here, Marcus?" Marcus spread his arms innocently. "I came to see my favorite cousin, of course. Word travels fast in our world, you know. I heard about the surgery, the big check you wrote, and I just had to see how the other half lives. Helping your girlfriend's dad now? How very wholesome." Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. Don't you dare say a word to Lila. Marcus smirked. Oh, she doesn't know about the little family fortune you dipped into to pay for Daddy's new heart? I'd think she'd be curious how a busboy at a diner could afford a $100,000 surgery. Ethan felt his blood run cold. Marcus, I swear. But Marcus only leaned in, voice dripping with mock sympathy. You've always been soft, Ethan. This girl, what's her name? Lila, she's just like all the others. She doesn't love you. She loves the security you represent. You'll see. Ethan's hands curled into fists, but he forced himself to walk away before he did something he'd regret. Marcus's words burned in his mind like poison. That night, after visiting hours ended, Ethan walked Lila home. She was quieter than usual, and when they reached her apartment door, she turned to him with an unreadable expression. Ethan, she said softly, I know you paid for my dad's surgery. He froze, searching her face. Who told you? No one, she said quickly. I guessed. The nurse said the hospital got a full payment up front, and you're the only one who could have done it. Ethan tried to speak, but she lifted a hand, cutting him off. I don't know how to feel about this, she whispered. I'm so grateful, Ethan. You saved my dad's life, but it also makes me feel like I'm drowning in debt to you. I hate that I can't even begin to repay you. He stepped closer, cupping her face in his hands. Lila, no, you don't owe me anything. I didn't do it for you to feel indebted. I did it because I love you. Her breath caught. You love me? Yes, he said without hesitation. I love you. I don't care about money or bets or any of it. I just care about you. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, I love you too, Ethan. I need you to promise me something. Anything, he said. Promise me you'll never lie to me again. No half-truths, no hiding things because you think you're protecting me. If we're going to do this, if we're really going to build something together, I need to know I can trust you. He nodded solemnly. I promise, Lila, no more lies. For a while, it seemed like things were finally falling into place. James recovered enough to go home, and Ethan helped Lila set up a small medical space in the apartment so she could monitor him closely. They spent their evenings cooking dinner together, laughing, and dreaming about a future neither of them had dared to imagine. But Marcus's words still gnawed at Ethan. He couldn't shake the fear that maybe Lila did see him differently now that she knew the extent of his wealth. She never asked for anything, never treated him like a walking bank account, but the thought lingered like a shadow. One Friday night, Ethan planned a small surprise. He brought Lila to a rooftop garden overlooking the city, a hidden gem he'd discovered during his month living simply. He spread out a blanket, set up candles, and made dinner himself. Lila's face lit up as she took it all in. Ethan, this is beautiful. He smiled, relief softening his chest. I wanted to do something for us. Just us. They sat under the stars, eating, talking, and holding each other close. For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt like they were exactly where they were meant to be. But the moment was shattered when a voice called out behind them. Well, isn't this romantic? Ethan whipped around to see Marcus standing near the edge of the rooftop, hands tucked casually into his suit pockets. What are you doing here? Ethan demanded, rising to his feet. Marcus shrugged. I told you, cousin, I was curious. I wanted to see how the fairy tale was going. He turned to Lila, his smile sharp. And you must be the lucky girl. Tell me, Lila, how does it feel to have landed the richest bachelor in the city? Quite the upgrade from a busboy, huh? Lila's brows furrowed in confusion. What are you talking about? Marcus, stop, Ethan snapped. But Marcus wasn't finished. Oh, he didn't tell you? Our Ethan here made a little bet. A fun game, really. He pretended to be poor just to prove he could live without the family fortune for a month. You were just part of the experiment. Lila's face went white. That's not true, she said, her voice trembling. Ethan stepped forward, panic clawing at his throat. Lila, no, he's twisting it. Yes, I took the bet, but it was never about you. I met you after it started. You were never part of it. But Marcus only laughed. Oh, come on, Ethan. She's smarter than that. Do you really think she'll believe you didn't use her to win your little game? Lila stared at Ethan, her eyes filled with hurt. Is this true? Did you use me? No, Ethan said desperately. Lila, I swear, I didn't. You mean everything to me. The bet doesn't matter. None of it matters. Tears spilled down her cheeks and she took a step back. I don't know what to believe anymore, Ethan. You promised me no more lies, and now—" Her voice broke, and she turned and fled down the stairs before he could stop her. Ethan stood frozen, Marcus's smug smirk burning into his back. He had won the bet weeks ago, but for the first time, he realized he might have truly lost everything that mattered. Ethan sprinted down the rooftop stairs, calling Lila's name, but she was already gone. He burst out onto the street, scanning in every direction, hoping to catch even a glimpse of her. Nothing. He stood there for a long moment, hands on his knees, gasping for breath. Marcus's cruel words echoed in his mind like a taunt he couldn't escape. "She'll never believe you." But Ethan refused to accept that. He loved Lila too much to let Marcus destroy them. The following days were unbearable. Lila didn't answer his calls, didn't respond to his messages. He went to her apartment only to find she wasn't home. James, her father, answered the door with a guarded look. "She's not ready to talk to you," James said gently, though there was steel in his tone. "She feels betrayed, Ethan. She needs time." Ethan's shoulders sagged. "Please, James, just tell her I'm not giving up." James gave him a long, measured look before closing the door softly. Ethan poured himself into work and charity obligations, but it all felt hollow. The penthouse that once felt like a symbol of success now felt like a prison. He thought constantly about the life he'd built with Lila in that tiny apartment, the laughter in the kitchen, the simple joy of falling asleep with her curled up against him. He'd give up every cent of his inheritance if it meant he could go back to that. But words alone wouldn't fix this. He knew he needed to show her, in a way that proved he wasn't the man Marcus accused him of being. One week after the rooftop disaster, Ethan walked into Hawthorne Enterprises headquarters, a place he'd avoided since winning the bet. He requested a private meeting with the board, ignoring the surprised whispers as he strode into the sleek conference room. He laid out his plan in simple, clear terms. He was stepping away from the family business. He would liquidate a portion of his personal assets to create a foundation, one focused on supporting healthcare workers and families struggling with medical debt. He refused to let wealth define him anymore. The board members were stunned, but Ethan didn't waver. This wasn't about rebellion or making a statement. This was about becoming the kind of man Lila could trust. 3 days later, Ethan received a text message. It was from James. "She's at the hospital. If you want a chance, go now." Ethan's heart pounded as he drove across town, barely registering the traffic. He parked haphazardly and ran through the hospital doors, breathless as he spotted Lila in the waiting area. She was still in her scrubs, her hair tied back, exhaustion etched into her features. She looked up when he approached, her eyes wary. "Ethan," she said softly. He stopped a few feet from her, his chest heaving. "Lila, please, just hear me out. If you still want nothing to do with me after this, I'll walk away. But I need you to know the truth." She hesitated but didn't tell him to leave. "I can't change the fact that I took the bet," Ethan began, his voice rough. "It was stupid and prideful, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But I swear to you, the second I met you, the bet stopped mattering. You were never part of it. Marcus wanted me to fail because he thought I couldn't survive without the money. But when I was with you, Lila, I realized how much better life could be without all of that. You saw me for me, not for what I could give you, and that meant more than anything." Lila blinked back tears, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. "How can I trust that this isn't just more sweet words? Marcus was right about one thing. I don't belong in your world. We come from completely different lives." Ethan shook his head fiercely. "You're wrong. I don't want that world. I've stepped away from it, Lila. I set up a foundation in your name, Monroe Hearts. It's going to help families like yours who are drowning in medical debt. It's not a publicity stunt. It's because of you. Because you opened my eyes." Lila's lips parted, surprise flashing across her face. You did that?" "Yes," Ethan said, stepping closer. "Because I want to build something real. With you. Whether that's in a tiny apartment or a mansion doesn't matter. I just want you." A tear slipped down Lila's cheek. "Ethan, I don't know if I'm ready to just forget everything. It hurts so much, feeling like I was just part of a game." Ethan reached for her hand, holding it gently. "I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving that you weren't. But I can't do it if you shut me out." Lila stared at their intertwined hands, her heart aching with the weight of everything they'd been through. She remembered the way Ethan had held her during her father's surgery, the way he'd stayed up nights in the hospital, the way he'd loved her without hesitation, and she remembered the pain, the lies by omission, the betrayal she'd felt on that rooftop. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I," Ethan admitted. "But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." Slowly, hesitantly, Lila lifted her gaze to his. "You really walked away from it all?" "Yes," Ethan said simply, "because none of it matters without you." Something in her chest loosened, a thread pulling taut then releasing. She stepped closer, tears streaming freely now. "Don't make me regret this," she whispered. Ethan's breath hitched. "Never." And then she was in his arms, her lips on his, and everything else fell away. The weeks that followed were a slow, careful process of rebuilding. Lila didn't want grand gestures. She wanted honesty, consistency, and proof that Ethan was the man he claimed to be. Ethan delivered. He kept working with the foundation, pouring himself into the mission of helping others. He took Lila on small, meaningful dates. Picnics in the park, quiet nights cooking dinner together, and never pressured her for more than she was ready to give. James, watching from the sidelines, grew to respect Ethan even more. "You've changed," he told him one afternoon. "She brings out the best in you." Ethan smiled softly. "She is the best of me." One evening, months later, Ethan surprised Lila with a visit to the rooftop garden where Marcus had tried to tear them apart. But this time, the space was transformed. String lights glowed overhead, and the scent of fresh flowers filled the air. Lila looked around, her heart swelling. "Ethan, what is all this?" He took her hands in his, nervous but resolute. "This is where everything nearly ended for us. But I want it to be the place where everything truly begins." Her breath caught as he dropped to one knee and pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "Lila Monroe," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've loved you since the day you walked into that diner. You taught me what really matters in life, and I will spend every day trying to be the man you deserve. Will you marry me?" Tears spilled down Lila's cheeks as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes." Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands trembling with joy. He stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply as the city lights twinkled around them. Months later, the rooftop garden hosted their wedding. It was a small ceremony, just family and close friends. James walked Lila down the aisle, proud and healthy. Marcus attended too, though he kept his distance, his usual smugness dulled by something like grudging respect. Ethan didn't care. All that mattered was the woman walking toward him in a simple white gown, her eyes shining with love. When they exchanged vows, Ethan's voice cracked as he promised never to take her trust for granted again. And when they kissed, sealing their marriage, he knew this was the real win. Not the bet, not the money, but the life they would build together, one built on love, truth, and the kind of happiness that no fortune could ever buy.